is life and philosophy. Hi everyone, this is Shannon Lee.
And this is Sharon Lee.
And thanks for joining us for this episode of the Bruce Lee Podcast, which is going to be about...
Walk on.
Walk on, my friend.
So, walk on is one of your dad's more famous quotes. And it's one of those really two simple words that feel like there's like a whole universe behind this.
Yeah, you know, when I'm like, somebody asks me to sign a book or something like that, I often write walk on in it, and then I think, I wonder if they know what that means.
Well, I just want to distinguish it from some people in like the entertainment industry might think like this is a walk on.
Yeah, no.
No, it's not that kind of walk on, it's walk on. So this whole concept, there's a great story behind this. So why don't we just start with the story of like, how did this even come to being?
Yeah, I mean, this phrase comes out of a story, a thing that happened in my father's life. My dad injured his back very seriously in 1969, and he was exercising as he always did. He had been training for many, many years, and he just got to a point where he decided to skip warming up.
Bad move.
Not a good idea. He just skipped some of the warm-up and just went straight to this exercise called a good morning exercise, where you put a barbell across your shoulders that has weights on either end, and you're standing, and then you just bend at the waist and go down and then come back up. And it's very strenuous. I mean, if you're not bending your legs, you're just bending at the waist with weight on your shoulders. And of course he was very strong, so he had a lot of weight on his shoulders, and he injured his sacral nerve in his back, in his spinal cord, very devastatingly. And he had to be taken to the hospital, where he was examined, and they told him after much examination that he had damaged this nerve and that he would never do martial arts again, and that he would likely not walk normally ever again. God. Which for a man like my father is devastating.
Yeah.
Right? Because he's dedicated his life to martial arts. He's trying also to have an acting career. He has a family to provide for, and he's a man of action. He's a man who, as a nickname, when he was a small child, his nickname was Mo Si Tong, which means never sit still. So this was really devastating for him. He was bedridden for months, and during that time he was very down, but he also, because he was Bruce Lee, and because he was who he was, and because he had core philosophies and beliefs that he could apply, he really started using that time where he was bedridden to investigate. He read many books. He read many books on mental and physical recovery. He also spent much of that time writing, which is why we have so many of his writings today, and particularly wrote much about his belief of martial arts, which he called his commentaries on the martial way. But he also wrote about mental fortitude and read many books. And there came a point where he was investigating physiology, biomechanics, self-help, and philosophy and all this, where he began to believe that he could construct his recovery. But it was going to take a monumental effort. So he took one of his business cards and he wrote down on the back of his business card the phrase, walk on. And what that meant to him, it was an inspirational tool. It was a reminder. And he created a little wooden stand for it and put it in clear sight of where he was, to remind himself to just keep moving forward, keep going, keep working towards his recovery.
And your dad was very purposeful and kind of dramatic when he had these moments of awareness, right? Like, yes. We talked about him creating that tombstone, and, yes. You know, he wrote this walk on, and it was like the beacon of light kind of came to him, or like glimpse of it, and then he just grabbed it and like turned it into something that was just brighter, became brighter and brighter.
Yeah, I mean, that's a thing that I think is so phenomenal about him, is that when he has these moments of clarity, or like what people call aha moments, he physicalizes them. He puts them into some sort of reminder to a physical form that is a reminder to him of that moment, so that he can revisit it and be re-inspired.
And so you're right that like this was one of these horrible injuries that could have taken him down. Many people don't recover from back injuries like this. But I'm so conflicted about this moment because, you know, this is the reason why you said like we have so many of his writings, is that he was grounded. He couldn't move, and so he had to still stay active, you know, while his back was injured, and thinking and writing his thoughts down was one of the ways.
Well, and that just goes to say, like, there are people who have injuries that they cannot recover from, right? But he was going to make use of that time. He used that time to see if he believed he could construct a recovery for himself, but he wasn't also just going to waste that time. He was going to use it to create a repository for the knowledge that he had up to this point. He was continuing to share himself with us, even though he may or may not, because there was a point in time where he didn't know if he was going to be able to recover. But he wasn't going to let that stop him from continuing to express himself.
Did your dad ever just feel sorry for himself? I mean, he was just like, why does this happen to me? No, it seems like he was in acceptance of all things that were happening, whether they were good or bad. It was all education for him, but he was mostly interested in like how he was going to react to those.
Yeah, listen, he was a human being.
Right.
Yes, he would get down, he would get frustrated, he would get angry, he would, I'm sure, have moments of doubt, but the important part is they were moments. He didn't stay there. And in fact, he says in one writing, he says, whether I like it or not, circumstances are thrust upon me, and being a fighter at heart, I sort of fight it in the beginning, but soon realize that what I need is not inner resistance and needless conflict. Rather, by joining forces to readjust, I need to make the best of it. So it's that thing, we all have that moment where we get super upset, and then later we realize, like, wow, I was really upset, when actually there's an answer to this. I just need to do X. You know what I mean? And that's a simple version of this, but he had all of this philosophy already, right, up to this point, that he had gleaned through other experiences. He was also going to glean something from this experience as well. I mean, I know for myself, one of the most difficult things I ever went through in my life was when my brother died. And that was such a dark time in my life. But from the experience of that, I was able to learn how to be happy again in my life. And that is an invaluable experience. It ultimately makes you stronger. So this is the same. I mean, he used to say, the reaction one shows to obstacles is what counts. It's not the obstacle itself. It's how you react to it. Your mental attitude determines what you're going to make of all of this.
Yeah, I mean, we get really caught up in the obstacle or the circumstance, right?
Yes.
And the thing is that we are all guaranteed as trapped in a stale routine.
Right. You don't want to have turned your mind completely off so that you're just going through your day with no conscious awareness, essentially.
I think people get focused on efficiency, right? So it's like, I don't want to have to think about what I'm eating, what I'm dressing like. I just want to like routinize everything so then I can be creative. But I mean,
But we talked about this. There's creativity in creating your day.
Right.
There's
and in the small moments.
In the small moments, right. There's creativity in creating your life from moment to moment.
Well, it's like saying, certain moments in your day are worthy of total presence, and certain moments are not.
Right.
Yeah, it's like saying, well, just create a habit around those mundane things that don't count. But there's real beauty in all of those everyday moments, right?
Yeah, and everything counts. Even rest, purposeful rest, counts. So it's just about paying attention, just being slightly more aware.
And walk on also means this additional idea of not loading yourself up with the emotional excess that's just going to make everything worse.
Yeah, he would say, why add the tension of emotional thought to a situation? Like he said, it's not the situation that's the problem. It's how you react to it. So if you decide to worry and fret and freak out, then it's actually going to make it harder to overcome whatever the problem is. When I say this to my daughter all the time, when she's saying to me, like, oh, I have this big test, and what if I don't do well on my test? And I say to her, like, you just need to study and try your hardest and do your best. This that you're doing right now is actually keeping you from studying, which is what is going to help you pass the test. You know what I mean? So I say, you've got to let that go. You've got to let that tension of emotion, of negative emotion, stop holding you back or adding extra burden to the task at hand. In thinking about when we were going to talk about this story and looking back at the quotes, I was looking through the Tao Te Ching and I came across this portion in there called Buddhism's Eightfold Path. And I thought it was so interesting because, my father was using it in relation to his training in martial arts. But when I thought about this moment of this injury, this massive injury, it really struck me as the process that he went through. And just quickly, the Eightfold Path is, you must see clearly what is wrong. You must decide to be cured. Speak so as to aim at being cured. You must act. Your livelihood must not conflict with your therapy, so you must be in the process with your therapy even in your daily living. The therapy must go forward at the staying speed, which is the critical velocity that can be sustained by you. You must feel it and think about it incessantly and learn how to contemplate with the deep mind. I think this is the path that he went through to be able to discover his recovery.
It's so interesting that in the previous episode we were talking about simplicity, directness, and freedom, but he was using this eightfold path, and it feels like processing it through the Bruce Lee process, all these words came out as walk on. It feels like all of this is kind of embedded in those two words.
It is, which is why it's a really powerful phrase that he came up with for him, but was very meaningful and it was an urging, right? When you say to someone, walk on, it's an urging.
It's also an action phrase.
It's an action phrase, that's right.
Mm-hmm. It's not just to kind of stay and sit in it. It's just, let's go to motion.
Yeah, I remember when we were doing the documentary I Am Bruce Lee, we interviewed the actor Ed O'Neill, who's on Modern Family, and he has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, which he got when he was an older man, and I remember him talking about my father's phrase, walk on, and he said, for me, I have the phrase, walk through the front door. Because he was like, it was so hard to get my black belt in jiu-jitsu, and every time I was supposed to be going down and taking a class at the gym, I didn't want to go. I was busy, I'm a working actor, I've got responsibilities and other things, and I'd much rather be relaxing, enjoying my life. And I just kept saying to myself, just walk through the front door. Just get your butt down there and walk through the front door. Because everybody knows once you walk through the front door in a jiu-jitsu class, they're not going to let you leave. But it's the same type of thing, right? It was his phrase for that.
So, since we just talked about walk on, how can our audience participate in this philosophy this week?
I think something that would be really great for everybody to do is think about, do they have a phrase that they have used in the past, or are they in a situation where if they had a phrase that could be sort of their medicine for that moment, that struggle that they're in, what would it be? I know for me, at one point, I had little post-it notes around my house that had the word be, just B-E, the period on it. And for me, that was a very active word, actually, because it meant just be here now. Be here in this moment now. Stop projecting yourself into worries about the future or freaking out and judging yourself about things you've done in the past. Just be here now. And I've had different things like that, depending what was going on. I know that when my brother died, I had a job. I was living in New Orleans at the time, and I had a job painting, not as an artist, but literally painting.
Painting walls.
Painting walls. And it was such a great job to have at that moment in time, because I could just show up, I could just get my roller and my buckets of paint and put on music and not have to think too hard about what was going on in my life, and just put all my effort into the manual labor of rolling cinder block walls, basically. And I remember at one point, I was so in grief about my brother's passing, and I was rolling the walls, and all of a sudden I just sort of mini collapsed, not fainted or anything dramatic like that. I think it was already crouched down on the ground, but I realized that I hadn't been breathing, that I had been holding on so tight. I was clenching my entire body and not taking deep breaths, and my body just was like, you gotta breathe.
Hey,
please, I'm suffocating. But it was an interesting moment for me to go wow, I didn't even know I was doing it. I was in such tension that I suddenly my body couldn't hold it any longer. And I just remember saying to myself so many times during that time, breathe.
Yeah.
So I would say, is there a phrase that you use, or one that you think you could create for whatever you're encountering at the moment that would be your medicine?
Yeah, and this could just be, just a small research assignment, just to look up a phrase that might help you in whatever you're struggling with right now.
Do you have any phrases you've used in the past?
Yeah, I've used a bunch of them, and I kind of use them, they seem to appear to me in the moment of whatever I'm struggling with. I had a really challenging first pregnancy, really scary, and when you have 5 doctors in white coats telling you things are not okay, it's a pretty scary space. And I just needed a trapdoor out of that feeling, and not a solution to the whole big problem, but just help me stop feeling the oppression of all of this negative information. And I just had this too shall pass, and I would just repeat that phrase to myself in the parking lot of the hospital.
Yeah, that's a good one. It's one that I remind myself of sometimes too, because I always remember, whenever you've struggled through something and gotten out the other side, you always remember oh, there is another side. Right? This too shall pass.
And also, I actually, these phrases and quotes from my master teachers helped me so much that I created a whole wall of them. and I made it an art project for myself, and your dad included as just one of my master teachers. We all have master teachers whose words connect to us. And I just bought these little photo cubes and stuck a picture of them and a quote that means something to me, and I made a whole kind of wall installation. So, and now anytime I feel overwhelmed or down or really challenged, I just go to that wall, I pick up a cube and I read the quote, and I look at just the whole wall and go, okay, every one of these people have faced harder problems than me. I can do it.
So please share with us your phrases that you use or ones that you are creating for yourself.
And we really want to hear how that's going for you. So we look forward to it.
And it's time once again for Awesome Asians and Happas, or AHA. This segment, as you know, is one where we like to just shine a light on some Asians that are out there killing it in the world and sharing their passion and their expression with us. And we just want to make note of that and share it with all of you. So who do we have this week?
This week we are giving a shout out and solidarity to actress Constance Wu.
Constance.
Constance is an actress, and she is on that show Fresh Off the Boat. And recently she kind of ignited a Twitter storm because she put a tweet out there in response to some news about Matt Damon being cast as the lead for this movie called The Great Wall, meaning the Great Wall of China. So I think that, she's a young Asian American actress, and usually, especially Asian women, aren't known to be vocal in protest and certainly in public to just speak out, speak truth to power and things like that. So, and I think what she was expressing in her tweet, which I'll read a little bit of, is not that Matt Damon, should or shouldn't be cast in a major movie like this, is just the frustration of people of color, how we feel when the same formulaic tropes and stories are told over and over again, that oh, well, the star of a film has to be white, and the story angle is white savior needs to come save the sea of brown people, black people, yellow people, or whatever.
Yeah.
And in this era of Oscar so white, when we have a chance to tell a story about a civilization like China and the Great Wall, that should the story be really about the white savior? Just a question.
Just throwing it out there.
Yeah. So let's hear some of what she said in her tweet.
Our heroes don't look like Matt Damon. They look like Malala, Gandhi, Mandela, your big sister when she stood up for you to those bullies that one time. Money is the lamest excuse in the history of being human. So is blaming the Chinese investors. POC's choices can be based on unconscious bias too. Remember, it's not about blaming individuals, which will only lead to soothing their lame, but I had good intentions, but money, microaggressive excuses. Rather, it's about pointing out the repeatedly implied racist notion that white people are superior to POC, people of color, and that people of color need salvation from our own color via white strength. When you are consistently making movies like this, you are saying that. You are. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Yes, dude, you fucking are. Whether you intend to or not, we don't need salvation. We like our color and our culture and our own strengths and our own stories. If we don't, we should. We don't need you to save us from anything, and we're really starting to get sick of you telling us, explicitly or implicitly, that we do. Think only a huge movie star can sell a movie? That has never been a total guarantee. Why not try to be better? If white actors are forgiven for having a box office failure once in a while, why can't a person of color sometimes have one? And how cool would it be if you were the movie that took the risk to make a person of color as your hero, and you sold the shit out of it? The whole community would be celebrating. If nothing else, you'd get some mad respect, which is way more valuable than money. So make that choice. I know that overcoming your own bias and doing something differently takes balls. Well, don't you want balls? Look, I know there are lots of people of color who honestly don't care, who think I'm being crazy. Well, excuse me for caring about the images that girls see and what that implies to them about their limitations or possibilities. If you know a kid, you should care too, because we were those kids. Why do you think it was so nice to see a nerdy white kid have a girl fall in love with him? Because you were that nerdy white kid who felt unloved. And seeing pictures of it in Hollywood's stories made it feel possible. That's why it moved you. That's why it was a great story. Hollywood is supposed to be about making great stories. So make them.
Hashtag hell yeah. I so want to acknowledge her because, you know, Asian women are really expected to be quiet and docile and not speak up about things. And I think because she's part of a younger generation, she's just like, yeah, I'm going to speak up.
Yeah, and it's great that she has the format through which to speak up.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, she doesn't need to ask for permission to speak up. That
That's
she has access.
That's right.
It's so the same, you know, just to like go back to your dad's struggle. Like this is exactly the same, you know, like
exactly it.
This is exactly it happening almost 50 years later. Same story.
Yep.
You are a person of color. You cannot be a leading person. It won't work. Middle America won't buy it.
Yep.
Which ended up being total bullshit back then.
Right.
And it always has been total bullshit.
It still
And
is.
yet there's a small group of people who are in the power positions to greenlight the money that it takes to make a big film. And I know that this is partly like Chinese money in production, but I want to say that the corrosive effects of colonialization affects Asian people too, and Chinese people. Many Asians are sometimes the most racist, thinking that, you know, white is better than themselves. And it's because we, like many people of color, were taught that. And this isn't like personal beef with Matt Damon or anything like that. It's just about an industry's perspective on the kind of storytelling they think that people want. And it's kind of like, oh God, like why do you have to do the same thing over and over again? You know, just innovate.
Yeah, no, and I think about my father's film, Way of the Dragon, where he's helping these relatives who have a Chinese restaurant in Rome, and the bad guys bring in Chuck Norris to fight him, and how many people were so moved by this underdog taking on like the Great White Hope, basically. Okay, they brought in the big white, beefy white guy to like put the smack down on my dad. And when he beat him in that movie, so many people were so thrilled and so
Finally,
excited,
right?
And so finally,
That the hero didn't have to be the white guy.
That's right.
In fact, it was your dad, like ripping out his chest hair and then blowing it in the wind in the Coliseum.
Exactly.
Very dramatically.
Exactly.
But yeah, like that we need our heroes and our stories to be presented with, you know, it doesn't even have to be like parody. It's like just sometimes, you know, just sometimes. And so you know, back to Constance and other people out there, you all have a distribution mechanism to say what you feel and speak truth to power. And, you know, if you keep speaking up, then things will change.
Yeah, thank you for honestly expressing yourself and sharing your point of view.
Thanks, Constance.
You're awesome.
Our next segment is Bruce Lee Moment. A Bruce Lee moment is an occasion in your life when Bruce Lee's philosophy helped you, inspired you, or motivated you to take action.
Yes, and this week we have an email from someone named Byron Yu. Byron wrote to us and he says, "Hi, my name is Byron from San Diego, California. I've been listening to your podcast for a few days now, and it's been very inspirational. It's awesome that you focus on Bruce Lee's philosophies because there's truly more to him than the martial arts he's known for. As a Chinese American, I've always struggled with finding the balance between the culture I'm born into and the culture I am born from. And hearing how one of the most famous Chinese Americans thinks definitely helps me put things into perspective. Perhaps it's not so important to find a defined middle path, but simply to walk the path you believe is good and right. Thank you, Shannon, Sharon, and the podcast team for doing this. Byron.
Oh, so nice.
Yeah, I really love it. I just can't say enough how much I love hearing people's stories and that we're affecting people out in the world. Like, it really makes my heart sing.
I know, it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I know that a lot of times, no matter who you are, you always feel a little bit like you're being tugged in a multitude of directions, right? And it's hard to find balance, no matter who you are and what you're doing. So I really appreciate that this is helping you find that balance, helping you to just say, no, my path is the path, right?
Yeah, and sometimes when you feel kind of isolated and alone, and you start questioning, your own instincts and your own intuition, and we're so happy that just listening to Bruce Lee's philosophy and words gave you the kind of confidence and comfort to say, oh yeah, I should, he had those doubts too, but then he kind of came back into his own knowingness about himself, and so it's great to hear that gave you that confidence. It's exactly what we wish for people.
Yeah, and even if it just made it so that you feel like, like some relief, just like, okay, all I have to do is be me.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And the thing is, you already know how to do that.
Exactly, that's right. So we support you, Byron, in being you. And thank you so much for writing in and sharing your Bruce Lee moment with us.
All right, cool. Well, thanks for joining us for the Bruce Lee podcast.
Yeah, thanks, and we hope you have a great week, and we'll look forward to speaking with you next time.
Yep, see you next time.
Right. Bye.
Bye. You can find show notes on brucelee.com and follow us at Bruce Lee on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Please subscribe to the Bruce Lee podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, and SoundCloud. You can email us or send us a short voice memo to hello@brucelee.com. And if you've enjoyed the podcast, please leave us a review in iTunes. It really helps out. This podcast is a labor of love and a free gift to you from Shannon Lee. If you would like to support us, you can send us a small donation or use our Amazon link on brucelee.com/podcast.
But also,
Wait, what's Jeet Kune Do?
Jeet Kune Do is the martial way that my father created, which expressed his personal expression of the martial arts that he created in his lifetime.
So this is like Bruce Lee's own martial arts philosophy and way, right?
Yes. And at its core are these three things: simplicity, directness, and freedom. And we are going to talk a little bit about Jeet Kune Do and the martial arts, but also we're going to talk a little bit about applying these philosophical principles widely in a way that anybody can think on them and apply them to their own lives.
So I think that some people who know Jeet Kune Do might think of it as just his own fighting arts, but it was all inclusive, right? It was about fighting arts, but it was about his philosophy. So why don't we start with just you kind of reading to us some key points that your